Sam sat on the ground and put his head in his hands. I wish I had never come here. I don't want to see no more magic, he said, and fell silent. After a moment, he spoke again thickly, as if struggling with tears. No, I'll go home by the long road with Mr. Frodo, or not at all, he said. But I hope I do get back someday. If what I've seen turns out to be true, somebody's going to catch it hot.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. Today we're reading Book 2, Chapter 7, The Mirror of Galadriel in The Fellowship of the Ring. And my name is Logan.
And my name is Zach.
Good to be with you here at the Mirror of Galadriel.
We are getting close to the end of this book, man.
Yeah, these end pages keep getting more and more narrow.
I mean, just look at that little sliver of pages we got left.
Just a little bit.
Hard to believe we're almost through Fellowship, but we're cooking right along here. This is a great chapter. Lots of little moments that are so just like indelible in my mind of Lord of the Rings.
Some of them feel almost like tossed off, but they're so.
Yeah,
you could write a whole book about some of the pieces that are just sort of like throwaway lines, you know.
Gimli and Legolas fall in love in this chapter.
Exactly. I thought that it was later on. I thought it was like more after they, chase after Merry and Pippin, but
it's kind of right now.
Right now, yeah.
It's kind of right now. Yeah, last week they were comparing bodies of water and seeing who could write the longest song about them.
Yes.
Now they're just like going off together in the woods, getting a little bromance brewing.
Walking around, touching trees.
Talking about how beautiful the Lady of the Wood is.
Yeah, right.
Galadriel is a lot like more unboundaried than I remembered. Like she's just reading people's minds left and right.
Yep.
Undressing people with her eyes.
The whole dynamic between her and Celeborn is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because like who's in charge in this situation? You know what I mean?
It's very clear that Tolkien, in Tolkien's mind, Galadriel is very much in charge. And it's funny because at one point she calls him like the wisest elf. And it's right after
he's said something totally unwise.
Yeah, he like chastises Gimli and she's like, "Hey, you're the wisest elf ever, and you've been here like since before the fall of Gondolin. But you're wrong, and I'm gonna school you. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna read everybody's minds." And she talks about how she's like basically like wrestling with Sauron across distance.
Yeah, like this like spiritual warfare is happening. He's trying to get a glimpse into her mind, but she doesn't let him.
Galadriel definitely stands as like a bit of a corrective to the critique that people like to lay into Tolkien that he doesn't know how to write women.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It's definitely worth noting that it's like a 400,000 word book with only a couple women who speak words.
Yeah, she gets the bulk of it.
So let's just name the women who have speaking roles in Lord of the Rings. Let's just name the women in Lord of the Rings. It's not a very long list.
So Galadriel,
Arwen, who isn't really given much to say. She's really more of like an admired being, but she doesn't. I think she really only says like a couple lines, if I remember correctly.
Arwen's like an idea. She's not really a character exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Let's see. Rosie Cotton. She has a couple lines.
Rosie asks Sam why he's been gone so long, but says that he looks fine. And I think that's just about all the lines that she gets.
That's about it. Is Goldberry a woman?
Goldberry is most definitely female. Whether she is a woman, I think is
right.
up for debate. She's definitely a female being.
Something. Yeah, right.
something creature.
Creature. Yeah.
We got Lobelia Sackville Baggins,
Uh-huh.
who is loathsome. Uh,
Till the end. Yeah.
she's given a little bit of a redemption arc.
Right. But she actually has a few lines, but
Yeah,
she doesn't she's not really like a fully formed character.
no.
Um Shelob. Wait, that's not a woman either.
Well, it's definitely a she.
It's a she, yeah.
Uh,
Um
yeah, we got
but
Shelob.
I mean I don't think it's like I think there's a critique to be had about the fact that there are really very few women in the book, but I don't necessarily know if you can say like Tolkien doesn't know how to write women because I don't think he necessarily like tries. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? But
yeah.
I do think with Galadriel there is a pretty complicated character there.
It's
Who,
complex. There's an adoration for Galadriel, which and here's where I'm getting into like psychoanalysis a little bit.
yeah,
She is very often compared to the Virgin Mary.
interesting. Sure.
And Tolkien, as a devout practicing Catholic, held Mary in a very high regard, and
Hmm.
Mary was a very big part of his prayer life. And so I think there's some real there when it comes to comparing Galadriel to the Virgin Mary. Even just the fact that the gifts that she provides them, the way that she sustains Frodo through essentially prayer through the
Yeah.
file of Galadriel. There's several times in Mordor where Frodo and Sam both start speaking Elvish
Hmm.
and words that they hadn't planned, and it's pretty heavily implied that that comes directly from the lady.
Right.
She clothes them in garb that protects them.
Hmm.
Um, she provides them with whey bread, which I think could really, really easily be compared to the Eucharist.
Yeah, sort of an unleavened wafer like bread. Hmm.
Yeah, that sustains you beyond like what normal bread could.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's definitely some there when it comes to comparing Galadriel uh, to the Virgin Mary. I think uh, people talk about Tolkien and his like awkwardness with women, but he suffered an incredible loss of his father when he was 3 and his mother when he was 12.
Hmm.
And in his mind, his mother died of diabetes, and this is before insulin was available
Hmm.
as a drug. And in his mind, his mother had converted to Catholicism when he was a younger boy, and that put her in the bad graces of her family,
Hmm.
and that meant a lot of removal of financial support, and made it so that they were kind of reliant on the charity of the local Catholic Church and a priest who kind of took the family under his wing named Father
Hmm.
Francis. And in his mind, his mother's death, I think she was in her early 30s. His mother's death so
Hmm.
young was almost like a martyrdom.
Hmm.
He saw her early death as like the direct result of her conversion. And for that reason, I think he held his mother in high regard just because it was his mother.
Yeah.
But also, I think he saw her as like a saint or a martyr.
That's
Um,
interesting.
and so I definitely like I see some the way that Tolkien writes about women, especially Galadriel, but Arwen and others as well. I definitely see this like kind of like reverence for women,
Hmm.
but very little like intimacy.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about that on the show. You know how that kind of intimacy, like that kind of friendship with women, was pretty rare, at least in England in this day and age,
Mm-hmm.
and that male and female spaces were, you know, just not mixed the way they are now.
Yeah.
And he, he was all in kind of this like romantic,
Yeah.
um,
Chivalric.
chivalric kind of like way of interacting with the world, which was very much like a brotherhood, a fraternity kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even when he was younger,
Yeah.
and maybe he turned to that, out of some of losing his mom and stuff like that. But I don't think it's totally surprising that this book is cast in that way.
Yeah.
But I also think that Tolkien had a good enough imagination and a sense of like human beings that he could, if you had given him a task, like I want you to write a story where there's a female protagonist throughout,
Yeah.
that he could have figured it out.
Yeah.
Um, I don't detect like misogyny.
I don't either. And I think that actually sets him apart from C.S. Lewis. I have like Tolkien and Lewis on my mind because I just read a biography by a guy named Humphrey Carpenter on the Inklings,
Uh huh.
and he spends like a good chunk of the book talking about Tolkien and Lewis, like their view on friendship,
Mm-hmm.
especially male friendship, but also just the complexities of their relationship with women. There's a section where he's talking about the Inklings and their relationship to women, and the first sentence is essentially C.S. Lewis was no misogynist.
Hmm.
But then it starts listing these like incredibly misogynist views that C.S. Lewis had about like women not being intellectually equal to men, like
Oh,
women
interesting.
women being like malleable in their thought, and like they try but they can't really keep up with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And C.S. Lewis until his later life wasn't married. He had some very strange relationships with women that you can Google. Uh I won't lay into you about his like weird sort of entanglement with an older woman named Mrs. Moore. I'll just let you Wikipedia that.
Yeah.
Um, it's definitely tantalizing.
Mm-hmm.
I won't. I'm not going to drag Clive through the mud and
No.
speculate about the nature of that relationship.
He
But
did finally have like at the end of his life, like someone who he thought of as like an intellectual equal, right? I can't remember her
yeah,
name, an American, right?
Joy. Her name was Joy.
Right, and like, but when I've read about that relationship, what comes across is like Lewis's like surprise that there's a woman that he would like care about.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that's what comes across. It's like, oh
He was
wow,
shocked.
like what a shocking thing. Like here's a woman who can like have a conversation, you know?
Yeah,
And it's like, dude, like it's just so I don't know, off-putting.
but bringing it all back to the text,
Galadriel.
I think like it's hard for me not to have like Tolkien's kind of psychology in mind as I read especially the female characters.
Yeah.
Like is Galadriel the Virgin Mary? No. Is Galadriel his mother in text? No. And
Yeah.
he would hate any type of psychoanalysis like that on him. But he was pretty clear, especially in his letters, that the Lady Galadriel and Mary, Mother of Jesus, were deeply intertwined in his mind.
Mhm.
And so, uh, yeah, I think that's worth having in your mind as you're reading this chapter.
It reminds me a little bit of that thing that George Lucas said about the prequels. There are criticisms that the prequels are kind of rehashes of the original trilogy, but he said it's like poetry. It rhymes. These things kind of rhyme. Tolkien's project is literally to express. Well, part of the project is to express these truths that he felt, Christian truths, Catholic truths that he felt were um, fundamental to understanding the world,
Yeah.
but in a pre-Christian context, right? So like he's
Yeah.
gonna, it makes sense that there would be sort of a rhyming character to marry in there,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
and so and I think it means that we actually have a pretty rich character for it.
Well, I think that was a worthy digression. Hopefully, it was a worthy digression into Tolkien's views on women. I'm sure this will come back up again when we get to the Eowyn chapters.
Yeah, Eowyn is pretty important in that regard.
Shall we jump into the meat of the text?
Let's do it.
So they've just like had their march blindfolded for part of the way, and then had their blindfolds taken out, and they essentially get to the heart of Lorien,
Right.
to an enormous tree that has a ladder going down it, and I think it's worthy of reading a little bit about this tree. It says, upon the south side of the lawn there stood the mightiest of all the trees. Its great smooth bole gleamed like gray silk, and up it towered until its first branches, far above, opened their huge limbs under shadowy clouds of leaves.
Mm.
What a beautiful description of a tree.
Shadowy clouds of leaves is, yeah, gorgeous.
Its great smooth bole gleamed like gray silk. But, this is a tree that's so big that to climb it up a ladder, you have to take breaks.
Yeah, it says a ladder. I had a hard time imagining what that meant exactly.
Well, so as I imagine it, there are these flets that are essentially like you can imagine like the deck of a ship,
Platforms, yeah.
platforms that are built up periodically. Um, and then there are like literal buildings built into the side of this tree.
Mm-hmm.
And like up to the flets, or I think the word this uses talon, like TALAN.
Yeah.
There are ladders that are periodically spaced up these flats, so that's how you climb it. Um, but let's listen to this description of the house. It says, at a great height above the ground, he came to a wide talon like the deck of a great ship. On it was built a house so large that almost it would have served for a hall of men upon the earth. So this tree is gigantic, like otherworldly big.
Yeah, huge. It's really cool how the elves kind of exist at one with this nature around them.
Yeah.
They kind of steward, they steward the nature, but nature also sustains them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's like a mutuality or something there.
It's funny, like seeing like there, like I think it was Sam's description where he's like, everybody, like, it doesn't seem like anybody's doing anything.
I mean, that's kind of like what Eden is supposed to be like, right? Like you
Yeah.
just are there enjoying. No one's doing anything, and no one wants to do anything, and they're happy that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like there's no reason to, have to like labor or work because everything is provided for you and sustained by, in this
Yeah.
case, Galadriel, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, it says that like they go on walks,
And they eat.
they eat, and they take naps. It's like
Sounds great to
awesome.
me, man.
Yeah, right. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like anybody wants to do anything else. So sitting in this great hall, we have Celeborn and Galadriel, and they're described so interestingly. Very tall they were, and the lady no less than the Lord, and they were grave and beautiful.
Mm.
They were clad wholly in white, and the hair of the lady was of deep gold, and the hair of the Lord Celeborn was a silver long and bright. But no sign of age was upon them, unless it were in the depths of their eyes, for these were as keen as lances in the starlight, and yet profound, the wells of deep memory.
Mm.
Galadriel is described as having a musical voice, but like deep.
Yeah, they're almost like living statues or something.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting them.
There's like a marble sort of perfection or something
Yeah, they're like carved out of marble. Yeah, that's a good way of
to,
thinking of them.
to them. But then if you imagine something like that coming to life,
Yeah,
I think that would be sort of terrifying. I think that's what he means by grave. I love the detail that they stand. That's like an elvish thing that like when a guest comes in, no matter who it is, even if you're the king of the world,
yeah,
you still stand up. There's like this,
yeah,
respect or something that you pay to your guests, no matter who
yeah. I
they
mean,
are.
she's the most powerful person in the room, but she's still gonna stand.
For Frodo,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So they're all greeted. I think the most notable greeting is given to Gimli.
yeah,
It is long indeed since we saw one of Durin's folk in Karas Galadhon, but today we have broken our long law. May it be a sign that though the world is now dark, better days are at hand, and that friendship shall be renewed between our peoples. That doesn't last long, because pretty soon, Celeborn is going to be like, "Dang it! I knew I shouldn't have let your dwarf in this
yeah.
hall.
He still has that.
You woke up a what?"
Right. But had I known that the dwarves had stirred up this evil in Moria again, I would have forbidden you to pass the northern borders, you and all that went with you. And I mean, they're relating Gandalf's death.
Celeborn says, "Here are 8. 9 were set out, such of the messages." But Galadriel's like, oh, well, he's like, maybe there's been a change of counsel. Like maybe the plan changed before it reaches us. And Galadriel's like, no. She said, I cannot see him from afar unless he comes within the fences of Lothlórien. A gray mist is about him, and the ways of his feet and of his mind are hidden from me. That's interesting.
I wonder if she means. I had a question whether she meant unless he were to come into Lothlórien now,
Yeah.
or is he always kind of like misty to her?
That's how I read it.
He's always sort of. He's not a person that she can just reach out and see.
But it's almost like she's saying like I don't think he's dead. Am I reading that wrong?
There's some implication that he's not. He's maybe in some like liminal
Yeah.
space or something like that.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting to kind of look at a timeline of like when exactly Gandalf is returned.
Mm-hmm.
But he does get taken from the mountain directly to Galadriel by the eagle, who kind of plucks him off the peak
Oh, sure.
of the tower where he throws down the Balrog.
Mm-hmm.
It's unclear to me like where that battle is like kind of like happening in the realm of the story right now. But
Mm-hmm.
it seems like she's almost like implying like he's not dead. And is interesting, like I kind of noted Aragorn also doesn't say he died.
He just says he fell, right?
He says Gandalf the Grey fell into shadow. He remained in Moria and did not escape. That's such an interesting way of putting it. I think like if you and I were relating the story, we'd be like,
He's
Gandalf
dead.
died.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and we made. I just edited the episode where we talked about Gandalf's fall, which I think was very emotional for me. I'll speak for myself. I always get emotional. Well, one of the things that I said was like Gandalf really dies here, like he really sacrifices himself. He doesn't know that he's going to be sent back,
Mm-hmm.
but there's almost like this like Galadriel is almost implying like, hey, I still kind of sense that he's out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
Aragorn
interesting.
seems to kind of be unwilling to be like he's definitely dead forever. He fell and he remains in Moria, but he doesn't say like he's definitely dead. I think that's worth noting.
I think it's everybody gets so much. It's a complicated dialogue. I mean, there's a lot of characters speaking here. Galadriel, Celeborn, Aragorn, Legolas. When Celeborn questions why they hadn't been told that this happened, Legolas says, "Well, we were too wary.
Yeah.
and the danger was too close to us. And then we forgot our grief
Yeah.
because we were here in Lorien. It kind of like helped us, buoyed us or something.
Right.
And then Frodo breaks in and says, "Yet our grief is great, and our loss cannot be mended.
Yeah.
Gandalf was our guide, and he led us through Moria, and when our escape seemed beyond hope, he saved us and he fell."
Mm.
And then Aragorn, jumps into the full tale. But even though maybe Aragorn doesn't say he died, I think Frodo thinks Gandalf's gone forever.
Yeah, I think they all do.
And
I think
Legolas does too, and so there is Aragorn maybe holds out some hope or something, but he also knows that Gandalf is not just a old man.
yeah.
He's this other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost have to wonder if like Aragorn wonders if Gandalf even can die.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good
Um
question. Although it does, he does seem convinced that like he's sort of stuck in Moria, like
yeah,
he
like
fell into the blackest pit that he could possibly fall into.
yeah. Yeah, and that's where he remains.
Mm-hmm.
Um I think that Aragorn's description of the Balrog is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It was both a shadow and a flame, strong and terrible.
Yep.
And that kind of gets into what we were talking about a few weeks ago about the Balrog being like a negation. Like he needs to use like metaphorical language even here just to describe what it is they saw.
You can just sort of sketch around the edges of it.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's strong and terrible. Like
yeah.
whatever it was. Um, but it's interesting because Celeborn is essentially like, why would Gandalf do this? Like, why would Gandalf bring you through Moria? Why would he take this risk?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, if it were possible, one would say that at the last Gandalf fell from wisdom into folly, going needlessly into the net of Moria.
Mm-hmm.
But Galadriel, you know, kind of like puts him in his place. She goes, "It would be rash indeed to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Needless were none of the deeds of Gandalf in life. Those that followed him knew not his mind and cannot report his full purpose. But however it may be with the guide, the followers are blameless. Do not repent your welcome of the dwarf." I think it's interesting because Celeborn, he asked a legitimate question here. He's like, what was Gandalf thinking going into Moria? And Aragorn warned him. He's like, hey, I led us up to the mountain and you didn't give me a word of blame when it failed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but hear me, Gandalf. If you go into Moria, beware. So
Yeah.
Aragorn has this like almost like premonition that Gandalf at least is not going to make it out.
Yep.
But I think you made a pretty convincing case that we keep coming back to this metaphor of a funnel.
Mm-hmm.
Where you start with multiple options and then it kind of comes down to one. And it's like they either had to go over the mountain, around the mountain, or under the mountain. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
only three choices. They tried to go over the mountain and failed.
Yep.
Because of their failure, they made their presence known to the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Where they were was known. And immediately after getting down the mountain, wargs hunt them.
Right.
So if they're going to go now, like their only choices are under the mountain or around the mountain. And if they go around the mountain, that's hundreds of miles.
And it's
With
closer and closer to Sauron's forces too.
yeah, and Saruman.
Well,
Like
yes,
you're
yeah,
you're
right.
going right down to the Gap of Rohan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be hunted by wolves the entire time. You're going to be seen by these birds that are spying on them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just a long time to fight off a pursuing enemy. So the only option left was to go to Moria. So we kind of know the answer to the question, which is like he really didn't have any other choice. The only other choice was to go back to Rivendell at that point,
Yeah.
which would be and ultimately a defeat. So Galadriel's
Yeah.
wisdom here, she's like, like don't call Gandalf foolish. Like he wouldn't have done this unless he had any other choice, and we know that that's the case.
Well, and the story also demands this, right? Like the hero's journey
Yeah.
that I would say Aragorn is on
Hmm.
requires Gandalf to fall.
Yeah.
we're not exactly on Aragorn's like we're not like part of Aragorn's hero's journey necessarily. It's sort of like a side journey that's happening because like Frodo is like in the middle of that, right? Like our narrative. But like for Aragorn, for his like trusted advisor and mentor to
Yeah.
fall,
Yeah.
it allows him to like step into leadership in a way.
Yeah.
And Gandalf doesn't re-enter the story in the same way that he did, right? He's totally transformed or mostly transformed
Yeah.
and kind of takes on a different role, I think. And
Yeah.
so it's also I think like the structure of the story really demands that Gandalf fall.
Yeah.
And I think Tolkien's understanding of like history is such
Yeah.
that Gandalf would kind of like know, right? Eventually I'm going to fall
Yeah.
without a guarantee of returning. And so, you know, those kind of premonitions or, you know, the foreshadowing that we get about this being like a really dark road specifically for Gandalf, not just for the company.
Yeah.
Um, there's like momentum toward that fall and sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Galadriel understands that as well. Also, like the wisest characters in the book always come back to do not question what Gandalf is up to.
Right.
Right? Like he is not Gandalf does not make foolish choices
No.
ever. And
Mm-mm.
so and they are and, you know, and they end up being right. That
Yeah.
his choices are those that are the best for the kind of completion of his mission. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Um, Gimli, his response to Galadriel standing up for him
yeah.
is like this is the beginning of Gimli's like adoration of the lady. Um, says she looked upon Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. So I mean, he's like kind of hearing like Celeborn's remarks as like a rebuke and like, hey, like dwarves caused this problem a couple thousand years ago, and we're still cleaning up their mess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Galadriel, she uses like dwarf language. She goes, "Dark is the water of Kelidzaram, and cold are the springs of Kibilnala, and fair were the many pillared halls of Khazad-dûm in the elder days, before the fall of mighty kings beneath the stone." She looked at Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. And the dwarf, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes. And it seemed to him that he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy and saw their love and understanding. Wonder came into his face, and then he smiled and answered, "Yet more fair is the living land of Lorien, and the Lady Galadriel is above all the jewels that lie beneath the earth."
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
It's not just about her beauty either. It's about the love and understanding that he sees.
Yeah.
You know, it's something about her love for Gimli as a neighbor is like edifying for Gimli in that moment
Yeah.
and kind of returns him to himself, even though he's been, you know, kind of knocked back by Celeborn.
Yeah.
And so her acceptance or grace toward Gimli is restorative for Gimli in that moment.
And he's like really defensive towards the elves. Like, like in the last chapter, when Legolas is talking about Nimrodel and how she was lost because of the evil that the dwarves awakened in Khazad-dûm,
mm-hmm.
he responds back like in defensiveness. He's like,
Right.
"Yeah, we didn't like we woke up the evil, but we didn't make it. Like we weren't the evil itself."
Right.
And Legolas responds like, "Oh, that's not what I said." But like you can feel the tension between
Mm-hmm.
him and Legolas in that moment, and it's almost like Galadriel opens him up to not see the elves as enemies, and it changes his life.
I also think he maybe accepts the sin of his people
Yeah,
in this moment, you know, and that allows him. I don't know, this is maybe like theological projection, but the fact that he doesn't get defensive with Celeborn. He just sits with the
Yeah.
failure that,
Yeah.
his people wrought twice now, right?
Yeah.
To like awaken the Balrog in the first place and then stir it up again, Celeborn says.
Yeah.
That his acceptance of that allows him to accept this grace from
Yeah.
Galadriel,
Yeah.
is doctrinally sound, I think, for
Yeah.
Tolkien.
Sure.
But also, I think, I think it's a really powerful character moment for
Yeah,
Gimli.
it's almost like a confession and then like an absolving, like confession and absolution.
You're a part of this fellowship as much as anybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she wants to sustain the entire fellowship.
And it's almost like she's like, yeah, we've not exactly knocked it out of the park either. Like
Right.
she's like, the elves, like she's talking about her and Celeborn, and she's like, he has dwelt in the west since the days of dawn, and
Mm.
I have dwelt with him years uncounted. For ere the fall of Nargothrond and Gondolin, I passed over the mountains, and together through the ages of the world we have fought the long defeat.
The long defeat.
She's
Wow.
hey, like we've not exactly like covered ourselves in glory here either. Like
Mm-hmm.
the Dark Lord is still on his throne in Barad-dûr.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we to judge for the failures of the dwarves? So there's just such wisdom in Galadriel, but still pride and power and dignity. She's got this gravitas, and she's like essentially she's like, we like it was me who summoned the White Council, and I wanted Gandalf to be in charge, but that didn't work out. But even now, there's hope left. Even though Gandalf fell, there's still hope. Even though I wish things had gone otherwise. Like we're not out of this thing yet, but like we have hope that even in the midst of like the failures that we've seen over countless years, uh, that the good will still prevail.
Yeah, somehow like these characters have finally been delivered to a humility that maybe they didn't have 2,000 years ago, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the dwarves are humiliated enough for Gimli to be able to be part of this fellowship. You know, humans are brought low enough that they don't have grand designs on, you know, defeating Sauron and becoming some greater kingdom. Aragorn, I don't think that's like necessarily his plan here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then for her to say, I summoned the White Council and I had all these designs, they went amiss. And then she's like, I'm not even going to do that anymore. I'm not giving you counsel. I'm not
Yeah,
saying do this or do that. I'm not
that's a really good
I'm
point.
not bringing together a new council. I'm not contriving anything. I'm not choosing one course or another. I'm just saying what is and in part what shall be. She has some glimpse into the future, right? Because
Yeah,
she's this powerful person. But I will say your quest stands on the edge of a knife and just be she says stray a little and it will fail to the ruin of all. But she doesn't have advice about what that means. She just means like stay faithful to the like task or something.
yet hope remains while all the company is true.
And so it's like she's now finally following Gandalf. Gandalf's like, no, I'm not going to be the head of the White Council or the White Council. That could be Saruman, you know.
Yeah,
And that's what everyone should have done all along is to have enough humility to not like try to cast yourself in the role of whatever hero.
and to trust the weakest to be
Yeah,
the one who will lead them.
right.
You know,
Instead
and
of instead of always, reaching for your Gilgalad or whoever to like, you know,
oh, you mean Glorfindel?
or yeah, Glorfindel. Thinking of a different.
Gilgalad was another strong one
Yeah,
though. So yeah,
but
it's not
but
you're
so
not far off.
but I mean these heroic characters haven't, it's not like they could vouchsafe the future,
Yeah,
and And so, finding a little hobbit is this totally unexpected way to go.
And a hobbit that's going to, in just a couple of pages, offer you
Yeah.
the
Right.
ring.
Right.
But her wisdom, yeah, I hadn't thought of it in exactly the way you just put it, but I think that's a really wise reading. That she's like, I tried to control things once.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Gandalf had enough wisdom to know that that's not the way to get it done.
Yep.
The way to get it done is not by control. The way to get it done is by hope and exhortation
Right.
of others. And she's like, and my way didn't work out. The person that we put as the head of the White Council has betrayed us.
Mm-hmm.
So she's almost like saying, like, now we're just gonna try a different thing. She's like, now I'm not gonna give you counsel at all.
Right.
I'm just gonna like give you a place to rest and give you what gifts I can and entrust you to carry on and stay true to yourselves, to the company.
Which is also, I mean, that's also what What's His Face did in the Shire. I can't remember his name now, but at Woodhall or whatever it was.
Old what's his face?
The first elves that they come across.
Oh, Gildor.
Gildor. Gildor also says, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Just take some friends that you love,
Yeah. Take those with you as our trusty and willing, yeah.
Right. And so it's not far off from what she's
Yeah.
saying here. She just has
Yeah.
more ability to help them.
What does Frodo have to say all the way back in like chapter 3? Like I think that's what you're referencing is chapter 3.
Yeah.
Where he's like, elves will say both no and do not go to elves for counsel because for they will say both no and
They
yes.
say both no and yes. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. But I mean, this line, I think we should definitely just nail this line because I think it's such a amazing line from the movie. I've heard this line in video games. I've seen this line on T-shirts. I've seen this line tattooed on people's bodies. Your quest stands upon the edge of a knife. Stray but a little, and it will fail to the ruin of all. Yet hope remains while the company is true.
Mm-hmm.
Banger.
Awesome.
One of the best lines in the entire book, right there.
Yeah,
I just think it's worth lingering on a little.
Yeah, that paragraph is awesome.
But she tells them to rest tonight, and then begins the like, what are we going to call this? Psychic interrogation, spiritual uncovering.
Yeah, I guess.
A temptation, like offering, an
Mm-hmm.
offering of an out, an offering of gifts that
Mm-hmm.
she may or may not have the power to give. A temptation to stray from the quest.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think she can see into the deepest desire of each member of the company's heart.
Yeah.
And it's what motivates their it's both what motivates their presence in the company in the first place
Yeah.
and what would take them away from the company.
Yeah.
So like Sam is there because of his love of Frodo, but I also think that he's there because he loves the Shire and he thinks
He's
going
got to
on this
protect it.
quest is how he will protect the Shire. But
Yeah.
equally, he could protect the Shire by actually being there,
Yeah.
And then like Boromir, for instance, he left, right, his land to go to Rivendell in the first place because of the threat.
Yeah.
And so he's on this, he's part of the company for that reason. But he also has this, his presence on the company is also to try to influence things toward Gondor.
Yeah.
And so there's a really complicated kind of double will thing happening that she can like see into.
Yeah.
And then say like you can either stay true to this company or you can like give in to
This temptation, this desire.
temptation or desire that you have, even though that's kind of what has you here in the first place.
Yeah.
And so there's like a test of faith or fealty or something.
I think Pippin is such a little dork.
Yeah, that part is so strange.
Pippin is like, man, Sam, you were blushing.
Yeah, he's
Like,
giving him a hard time.
it's like, Sam, like it looks like you had a little bit of a guilty conscience, my guy. She broke you down quick. And he's like, I hope there was nothing worse than a wicked plot to steal one of my blankets. And Sam Sam just has none of it. Like Sam, this Sam never jokes.
No, Sam is pretty serious.
He never
He's
jokes
very
with.
earnest.
I mean, he will like tell Pippin from time to time, like, you're talking too much. Like there was a point when he's like, hey, I'm trying to sleep and it's not helping with you talking so much if you take my meaning. There's always like this kind of like reserved thing with Sam. Uh it's almost like Pippin and Merry are still like masters in Sam's mind. So
Right.
he's not gonna joke with them. He would never say that to Pippin. He would never be like, hey, looks like you were blushing back there when the lady was looking at you. I hope you weren't trying to steal. Like he would never say that. And in fact, his response is really funny. It's like, I never thought, no such thing. And I'm in no, and he was in no mood for jesting. If you want to know, I felt as if I hadn't got anything on, and I didn't like it. She seemed to be looking inside of me and asking what I would do if she gave me the chance of flying back home to the Shire to a nice little hole with a bit of garden of my own.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to compare this temptation that Sam has with the temptation that he has when he's wearing the ring
Mm.
later. Because when he's wearing the ring, his like kind of like we've talked about, like Professor Corey Olson calls them ring induced monologues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his ring induced monologue is like envisioning him as this like master gardener,
Yeah, the greatest gardener ever.
the
Yeah,
greatest gardener who ever did live.
right.
And he's such a great gardener that he like undoes all the evil of Mordor, and he becomes this like great leader of men who like calls armies to him. But he
Mm-hmm.
like snaps himself out of it and he's like, no, like, what do I need? I actually just need a little bit of land that I can call my own, and enough of a garden that I can work with my own two hands.
Mm-hmm.
And that's his like good hobbit sense. And that's like what Galadriel offers him. She doesn't offer
Yeah.
him like armies and grandeur. She's like, how about a little plot of land with a nice
Mm-hmm.
little hobbit hole? It's almost like the Last Temptation of Christ. When's the last time you
Yeah.
watched that movie?
It's been years, but that's a really good comparison.
It's almost like, yeah, you can come down off that cross and you can marry Mary Magdalene and you can have like a normal life. Like that's the temptation that
Yeah.
that is given Sam here. It's like you can, but it is a temptation. It's not some. It is a it's contrary to his goal.
Right. I think I mean Sam is the only person who really tells us what he saw.
Yeah, Mary kind of says like, it was kind of similar, but like, he doesn't get into it.
Almost exactly what I felt myself. Only well, I don't think I'll say any more. He ended lamely.
Yeah, like almost like he's like almost like embarrassed to admit whatever he was offered. It says all of them it seemed had fared alike. Each had felt that he was offered a choice between a shadow full of fear that lay ahead and something that he had greatly desired. Clear before his mind it lay, and to get it he only had to turn aside from the road and leave the quest and the war with Sauron to others.
Mm-hmm.
So Gimli's like, yeah, that's basically what I was offered too, and that I wouldn't have to tell anyone about it.
Mm-hmm.
But Boromir's response, I think, is really telling. It's like, she seems to be tempting us with things that she didn't actually have the power to give us.
Uh-huh.
It need not be said that I refuse to listen. The men of Minas Tirith are true to their word, but he doesn't say like how he would break, and that I think is telling.
He also just thinks all elves are the same, you know.
Yeah,
He's like, I don't trust these elves.
yeah,
I don't want to be here. I didn't want to come here in the first place.
yeah,
Um and he's unwilling to see, Galadriel's wisdom. And it's
yeah,
really contrasted with Sam, who says later on, a couple pages, he says, when Frodo asks him, what do you think of elves now?
yeah,
I asked you the same question once before. It seems a very long while ago, but you've seen more of them since then, he says. I have indeed, and he says, and I reckon there's elves and there's elves. They're
yeah,
all elvish enough, but they're not all the same.
yeah,
So he really takes each elf he meets on face value, you know?
yeah, yeah. He's like, these elves
Um,
are different than the elves that we've encountered.
yeah, this is like a
Like,
different place and a different kind of way of being an elf than
Yeah.
what
Like
Legolas has got going on, you know,
they belong to this place the same way the hobbits belong to the Shire, and
even more so.
there's like a rootedness to these elves.
Yeah.
They're not in a hurry to be getting anywhere else.
Right. Right.
Aragorn essentially tells Boromir to
Shut
shut
him.
up. Yeah, he's like, listen, idiot. He's like, you are showing your your true self here because
Mm-hmm.
uh like the only evil that comes out of this place is evil that's brought in.
Yeah.
So like don't basically just admit to us all that that you really want this ring, and then he like throws himself down and falls asleep.
Boromir says that, you know, he believes that, well, she's offering us something she can't give us.
Yeah,
And then he basically like tells the whole story right there.
yeah,
You know, he sort of says like, I don't trust these elves. I don't trust anybody but myself and my own people, and
yeah,
certainly don't trust a hobbit to,
yeah.
you know, carry the ring into Mordor.
Should be me.
Um, should be me. And that nationalism or whatever that he has is so, it's so deep inside him that, you know, he can't really see outside of it.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to talk about Frodo's song to Gandalf?
Yeah, so they end up spending, I can't remember if it's here or later, but you know, they spend more than one day.
Yeah, they remained some days in Lorien as far as they could tell or remember.
Yeah, they don't even really know because one day kind of just leads into the other, I guess. And
It seemed to them they did little but eat and drink and rest and walk among the trees, and it was enough.
we do get that nice detail that Gimli and Legolas go off and walk abroad in the land, and the others kind of wonder like, oh wow, Legolas and Gimli are like buddies now. What happened? You know?
So, yeah. So that
Um,
Lady Galadriel happened. That's what happened.
yeah, exactly. And I love that it's this is so profound, and I don't know, maybe this comes from Tolkien's life and war experience, but as they were healed of hurt and weariness of body, sorry, as they were healed of hurt and weariness of body, the grief of their loss grew more keen. And as they are in that, you know, as they're in this place and being healed, they can somehow, there's like a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And because of that vulnerability, they are able to get more and more in touch with the loss they feel about Gandalf.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they're surrounded by these elves whose like job, like their job is like, their like vocation is to just like sing
Yeah.
songs of praise about Galadriel or a tree or, you know,
Yeah.
lamentation about Gandalf in this case. And so Frodo is, well, Legolas, first of all, I think it's so beautiful that Legolas says he can interpret the songs for them, that he doesn't have the skill, and he's too full of grief. He's too full of grief to even be able to say like this is what these songs are about. But Frodo does he takes it upon himself to put something of his sorrow into halting words. I love this because it's a distinction between him and Bilbo.
Yeah.
He was seldom moved to make a song or rhyme, even in Rivendell. He had listened but not sung himself. Bilbo's always, you know, impressing all of his little rhymes on everybody.
Bilbo was ready.
Frodo's a really different guy. Like he's not, you know, he's a little more of an introvert maybe than Bilbo is. Bilbo's like a big time extrovert.
Yeah. Frodo's more a more reluctant poet, but he still got that in him. I mean, it's almost like he's like a sponge. He just like can't help but be part of this like creative force
Mm-hmm.
in Lorien.
And Frodo, you know, he put something together in his mind, but somehow when it comes to express it and actually say it out loud,
Yeah.
it kind of falls apart on him. He can't quite, you know,
Yeah.
grasp it.
Yeah.
Um, he said when he tried to repeat it to Sam, he only says
Yeah.
this to Sam. Only snatches remained. Sorry. When I was reading this last night, I could barely read it because I was like crying so much. And it says faded as a handful of withered leaves. You imagine how beautiful like a green full leaf is in the summer, and then
Yeah.
that same leaf is like this curled up like
Yeah.
crunchy thing, in fall. But it's still so beautiful.
Do you mind if I read a little bit of it?
Yeah, go ahead. I can't read it. I'll just cry. So,
All right. You just you can just cry while I read
okay.
it.
I'll just silently weep while you read.
When evening in the Shire was grey, his footsteps on the hill were heard. Before the dawn he went away, on journey long without a word. From Wilderland to western shore, from northern waste to southern hill, through dragon lair and hidden door, in darkling woods he walked at will. With dwarf and hobbit, elves and men, with mortal and immortal folk, with bird on bough and beast in den, in their own secret tongues he spoke. A deadly sword, a healing hand, a back that bent beneath its load, a trumpet voice, a burning brand, a weary pilgrim on the road. A lord of wisdom throned he sat, swift in anger, quick to laugh, an old man in a battered hat, who leaned upon a thorny staff. He stood upon the bridge alone, and fire and shadow both defied. His staff was broken on the stone. In Khazad-dûm his wisdom died. Incredible.
It's so good. I think my favorite stanza is the a deadly sword, healing hand,
Yeah,
the back that bent beneath its load, like Gandalf is so human.
yeah. A weary pilgrim.
Yeah, the contrast between a trumpet voice and a burning brand and the weary pilgrim.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
I'm also impressed by Tolkien here because he's written these beautiful lines from Frodo, and then to follow that up right away with Sam's comparatively
Simple.
simple lines. That takes real skill, I think,
Yeah, to write in different
um,
voices.
to write in two different voices like that.
In poetry where it has the same structure.
It's the same structure in a different voice. I mean, that's amazing. I think.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't do that. I mean,
Not only can he write a poem, he can write a poem with the voice of a character that he created, and it's just like so undeniably that character. The finest rockets ever seen, they burst in stars of blue and green, or after thunder golden showers came falling like a rain of flowers.
it. I mean, last night as I read this, I truly was like having difficulty reading because I was crying,
Yeah.
and then I come to this part about Sam and really cringed, and I.
He's a simple boy.
He's just a simple boy. Oh, Sam. And I really cringed. And I mean, I love Sam for it. Like, it's so endearing, but it's
Yeah.
also like, oh, boy.
Oh,
And Frodo lets him down easy
yeah.
because Sam says, well, that doesn't do him justice by a long road. And Frodo says, no, I'll leave that to you, Sam. Or
Or perhaps
maybe
to Bilbo.
Bilbo won't have any, shame about writing about something as silly as fireworks. But
It's so sad to hear him say that he like can't bear the thought of bringing the news to Bilbo. Like that's one of those things that just like that's written by somebody who has like truly experienced loss and grief because that's exactly how it happens. Like you're sad for yourself, and then you just like you're riding these waves of grief, and then you just think to yourself like, oh my god, like how am I gonna tell so and so? Like this is
yeah,
exactly how it happens.
yeah,
Like this couldn't be written by anybody but someone who had experienced like true grief in their life.
right.
This is written by somebody who lost like two of his dearest friends in World War I. This is somebody who
Right.
lost a mother and a father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this is you can't fake this stuff. We get Sam saying he sort of presciently says, "I'd love to see some elf magic," and basically as
Mm-hmm.
soon as he does, Galadriel appears.
Yeah.
She kind of just makes her way. She kind of glides into frame right as he says, like, I'd like to see some elf magic. And it's like, oh. And Frodo says, I hope very much that before we go, we shall see the Lady of the Elves again. And it's like, ooh,
There she
here she.
is.
They summon her essentially,
Mm-hmm.
um, or she kind of like summons them. Like it's like kind of like is she almost like opening their minds to these thoughts, and that's what brings her. Do they bring her? Does she bring them? Either way, she sort of beckons them. It says she spoke no word but beckoned to them, and they follow. And I think it's worth noting when she brings them into the opening where the mirror is, this basin of water. It says the evening star had risen and was shining with white fire above the western woods. So that evening star is Venus,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also the light of Arendelle, which is one
Mm-hmm.
of the Silmarils that Elrond's dad like carries above the world,
Mm-hmm.
guarding it against the return of Morgoth.
Mm-hmm.
So such a deep cut there.
Yeah.
And we're about to see that light illuminate her through her ring, but that's the light that the Phial of Galadriel shines to like protect Frodo from Shelob. It's the light that Sam sees when he's laying down in Mordor and is like nearly starved and dying of thirst,
Mm-hmm.
and he has this vision of the purity of the white light. Like this star is almost like a character in Lord of the Rings on its own.
Absolutely. Yeah, it always shows up in those moments of great import. At some point here, it says it's so bright that it casts a shadow, like the moon would cast a shadow. So they enter kind of a garden
Opening,
or something, an opening.
yeah, like a closed garden,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this basin, and then there's a silver pitcher, and she fills it with water from a stream, and then she fills the basin, and she basically invites them. She's like, "You want to look in the mirror?" She's like, "Sam, you said you wanted to see some elf magic, bro. You want to peek your little ruddy little face over this water and see what you see?" And he's like, "Well," he's like, "I did say I wanted to see elf magic, so I'm here. Why not? Why not give it a go?" He's like, "I probably won't understand what I see, or I'll probably just see the stars reflected or whatever." But
Yeah, I
she's like,
love that.
"All right, well, just whatever you do, don't touch the water." What do you make of that? She tells Frodo not to touch the water too. What do you think
I'm
happens
not.
if they touch the water?
I'm not sure. You like fall. You like get frozen or obliterated or I
It's
don't know.
creepy. Like she just like kind of gently is like, "Don't touch the water." Like what? What if I do? I kind of want to know.
Pippin would
Um,
definitely touch it. They should have brought Pippin so we could see what happens when you touch the water.
Pippin would touch that water.
Just to jump in.
We get a little like insight into Pippin being like, "Oh, I gotta touch me some of that water." So he looks in and he gets all these visions. I mean, he gets a vision of Frodo being pale in Mordor. He gets a vision of the Shire. He gets a vision of Ted Sandyman cutting down a tree that shouldn't be cut down. And then finally, he gets a picture of the Gaffer being thrown out of Bagshot Row. They're digging it up, and he's just carrying his things away like in a little wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Um, and it just breaks him down. He's like, I got to get back home. He's like, I can't stay here. Um, she's like, you can't go home alone. You did not wish to go home without your master before you looked in the mirror, and yet you knew that evil things might well be happening in the Shire. And then there's this line here, which is really creepy. She says, "Remember that the mirror shows many things, and not all have yet come to pass. Some never come to be unless those that behold the visions turn aside from their path to prevent them. The mirror is dangerous as a guide of deeds." So she's like, hey, some of these things may not happen unless you quit what you're doing to go and prevent them from happening. Like
Mm-hmm.
you leaving to prevent them from happening may be the very thing that causes them to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's just such an interesting warning. Sam says, "I wish I had never come here. I don't want to see any more magic." And he says, "No, I'll go home by the long road with Mr. Frodo, or not at all. But I hope I do get back someday. If what I see turns out to be true, somebody's going to catch it hot."
That Ted Sandyman.
I'll
Oh,
chop him
Sam.
down.
Yeah. Do you now wish to look, Frodo? Said the Lady Galadriel. You did not wish to see elf magic, and were content. And again, Frodo's like, well, what do you think? She's like, I'm not going to tell you one way or another. And he, of course, chooses to look, and he gets this very profound.
Let's just kind of break down the things that he sees. So he sees a white wizard
Yep.
that he's like, oh, Gandalf? But then he's like, no, must be Saruman.
Must
Gandalf's
be
dead.
Saruman. Yep.
And then he sees Bilbo with like a disheveled desk with his papers everywhere. And then he gets a vision of the sea. This is a really this really reminds me of like his dreams that he had in the House of Bombadil. It says the
Mm-hmm.
mist cleared and he saw a sight which he had never seen before, but he knew at once: the sea. Darkness fell. The sea rose and raged in a great storm. And then he sees a white fortress with 7 towers.
Minas Tirith, right?
I imagine it must be Minas Tirith. And it says a smoke as of fire and battle arose, and again the sun went down in a burning red that faded into gray mist, and into the mist a small ship passed away, twinkling with lights. It vanished, and Frodo begins to kind of pull away. He's like, okay, that must be the end of the vision. But then he sees an eye, and the eye is lidless, rimmed with fire, as yellow as a cat's, watching intently. There's a black slit of a pupil.
Mm.
Just absolutely terrifying. And it begins to drag him down into the water. The weight of the ring becomes like a stone. That's when you get Galadriel being like, hey, don't touch the water.
When the eyes look, he feels the eyes looking for him.
Yeah. He steps back, shaking.
I like to imagine this not as the like fiery CGI eye from the movies, but like literally as like Sauron's eye,
Yeah.
up against like a telescope or something like that. Like just this
Yeah.
like fleshy, like real thing,
Yeah.
And Galadriel tells him not to be afraid.
Yeah.
And then he has a whole vision of her. I mean, it's literally happening. And she says, the enemy's trying to find me too.
Yeah. But I'm not gonna let him. And she kind of like almost like puts out her hand like in a symbol of rejection. And that's when her ring is revealed to Frodo. So like she is one of the bearers of the 3 elven rings. She is
Uh-huh.
extremely powerful. Like the name of her ring is Nenya,
Mm-hmm.
and it says that it's made of adamant, which it's kind of like a made up mineral, but it's like basically like diamonds, like imperishable stuff. It
Mm-hmm.
says that as she held up her hand in rejection and denial, Earendel, the evening star, shone clear above. So bright was it that the figure of the elven lady cast a dim shadow on the ground.
Mm.
And that's when he sees the ring. And she's like, hey, I can't hide this from you. You're the ring bearer.
You're the ring bearer, and you've seen the eye of the enemy. So somehow seeing the eye of the enemy in the pool
Yeah.
somehow changes Frodo's ability. I mean, he's been changed in multiple ways, right? He got stabbed
Yeah.
by the Morgul blade. He's
Yeah.
the ring bearer, and he had this experience with the mirror. And somehow that he can now like view her in like the fullness of her power.
Like who she really is. Like she can't, like in the same way that she is able to kind of like peel back the barriers that other people have around their hearts. He is able to see her as she truly is.
Mm-hmm.
And she's essentially like, hey, here's the deal. She lays it out. She's like, you have to bring that ring into Mordor. Nobody else can.
Mm-hmm.
And if you fail,
We're
all that you
toast.
see here is, yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. That's something that Elrond hinted at in the Council of Elrond. He
Mm-hmm.
never says it like in a real declarative way. Where he's
Mm-hmm.
like, I perceive that, if Sauron gets the ring back, that the powers of the 3 will be subjugated. If he succeeds in destroying the ring, I perceive that our power will be so diminished that we either have to go into the west or become faded on the earth and essentially just be, secret beings who live like in woods and in caves, but will never
Mm-hmm.
be as powerful as we were. So, like, regardless, either we're going to be subjugated or we're going to diminish. like if you succeed. That's what Galadriel says here. Like, this is definitely going to happen, she says. She says, if you succeed, our power is diminished and Lothlórien will fade and the tides of time will sweep it away.
Mm.
Um, we must depart into the west or dwindle to a rustic folk of dell and cave, slowly to forget and to be forgotten. And that's when Frodo's like, and what do you wish? And she says, that what should be shall be. That's what I wish. That what should be shall be. She says, for the fate of Lothlórien, you are not answerable, but only for the doing of your own task. And that's when Frodo offers her the ring.
It's like the whole thesis of the book right there.
Yeah. What should be shall
What
be.
should be shall be, and you have a small piece of it that is yours to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frodo offers her the ring, and then she laughs.
Yeah, she's like, I don't deny that my heart is greatly desired to ask what you offer. She's like, I've been itching to ask you to give me the ring.
She
and
says,
here you are.
You begin to see with a clear eye. Now you know what I want, what I really want.
Yeah.
Is to have the power and control that I already told you that I'm now ceding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you would give it to me. And you're right. I'm probably the right person to give it to. Except no one is the right person to give it to.
She's like, you would give me the ring freely?
Yeah.
She's like, you would give this thing to me? Instead of a Dark Lord, you would set up a queen?
I don't even have to take it from you. I can take it as a free choice, the same way that, Bilbo took it and didn't kill Smeagol.
Yeah.
And that sort of like helped him, right? Resist the power of the ring. I could also resist the power of the ring, but in the long run, it would be just as terrible or more terrible than if Sauron had it.
She says, I shall not be dark, but beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night. Fair as the sea and the sun and the snow upon the mountain, dreadful as the storm and the lightning, stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair.
Yeah.
She's like, people wouldn't hate my reign.
Mm-hmm.
People would love it.
Yeah. Be like a revelry.
I wouldn't be a Dark Lord. I would be a queen, which would almost be worse because people would love their subjugation to me.
Right. Then, and I think this is so worth looking at, she lifts her hand up, and from the ring that she wore, there issues this great light that illumines her alone and left all else dark. That reminds me of the Balrog.
Ooh.
It's like a negative light, It's
It
almost
is...
like the way a black light is in a way,
Yeah, yeah.
That the only thing that's illumined is her. She
seems tall beyond measurement and beautiful beyond enduring, terrible and worshipful.
It's like a manifestation of like narcissism or something like that. This light only illumines her. Everything else, like it steals the light from everything else and gathers it to her.
Yeah.
Beautiful beyond enduring. Wow.
But then she lets her hand fall.
Yeah, it's such a human moment.
And then she's shrunken.
Yeah, and then it really reveals her as just a person.
Yeah. She's a slender elf woman, clad in simple white, whose gentle voice was soft and sad. I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. And what we learn through like supplemental texts is that Galadriel had been banned from going to the west because she had rebelled against the Valar and going to fight Morgoth to retrieve the Silmarils. So Galadriel is like one of the only elves that we meet who has stood in the light of the trees of Valinor. And when the trees were destroyed, the only light from those trees that were left were locked in the Silmarils that her relative Feanor had made. And so some of the elves in Valinor, the Noldor, they say, we're going to go and we're going to wage war against Morgoth and we're going to avenge the killing of the trees and we're going to get back the Silmarils. And the Valar are like, don't do it. Like that way leads only to destruction. And in order to go do it, they steal ships from their brethren who are ship builders, and they kill them and take their ships. And because of that kinslaying, her people, including her, are banned from going back to Valinor. But this is the moment when that ban is lifted for her, when she denies the same desire for power and domination and revenge. That's the moment when she says, "I passed the test. I will diminish and go into the West." That door wasn't open to her before this very moment. She like feels that grace. She feels that forgiveness.
So it says that they stand for a while in silence. And then there's this, she says, well, now you have to leave.
Yeah. So,
for now we have chosen. Something
Yeah.
about the act of the will.
Yeah.
Both of her and Frodo, and of Sam for that matter.
Yeah, Sam's choosing to go on.
Things get going here now.
Yeah.
No more time to walk through the trees here. It's time for you to leave.
There's this question that Frodo asks her, which I find so fascinating.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey, I've been meaning to ask for a long time." And I meant to ask Gandalf this in Rivendell, but I never got around to asking it. He's like, "I am permitted to wear the ring. Why cannot I see all the others, so all the other rings, and know the thoughts of those who wear them?" And the answer that she gives, I think, is so interesting. She goes, "You have not tried."
Yeah. And this shows Gandalf's, as we were talking about before, Gandalf's true wisdom.
Yeah. He was the exact perfect person to ask to bear this burden because he doesn't have that in him.
You haven't trained your will to the domination of others.
No.
You actually have to form yourself as a person, or deform. What you have to do is deform yourself as a person. You have to deform yourself as a person and train yourself to lord it over other people.
Yeah.
But you haven't done that because you're a little hobbit.
You don't have that desire in you.
And Bilbo never taught you how to manipulate people and
But it would destroy you if you did. She's like, it would destroy you.
Yeah, it would destroy you because you would never be strong enough.
No. But she's like, hey, your sight is already keener than you know. She's like, you basically did see my intentions. You did see things that other people didn't see. In fact, Sam didn't even see my ring.
I think maybe Sam doesn't really comprehend almost any of this, what happens here. So he just believes that he sees the star through her fingers. But I don't even know if he really understands what.
No, because even then he's like, are you sure you don't want this thing? You could really set some things to right. And this is how it ends. And I think this is a perfect place to end the episode.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You'd make some folk pay for their dirty work." And she goes, "I would. That is how it would begin. But it would not stop with that, alas. We will not speak more of it. Let us go." Great chapter.
Great chapter for sure. Well, thank you for reading along with us. We hope that you'll join us next week for Book 2, Chapter 8, A Farewell to Lórien. If you want to help us out, please share the podcast with a Lord of the Rings fan in your life. Of course, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Leave a review. It helps us feel good about ourselves and helps the podcast as well. And of course, visit waywardwizards.com for more info, as always.
And remember, hope remains while all the company is true. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.